Voices from the Mausoleum is brought to you by the You Run Podcast Network and yourunpodcast.com.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome to another indie horror author interview with someone that's never been on the channel before.
Never been here.
I wonder if people who see our stuff together are like, how come Kat hasn't had an author interview? Like, of all people, she should have already had one. So we're remedying that now. If you're not familiar, this is Kat Voleur.
Hi.
She's released several books, but we're talking about one. What was the original release date for this one?
This came out on January 15th, I believe.
January 15th. Okay, I couldn't remember. God. Okay. Well, I had surgery like right after that, so the timeline feels really weird to me.
Yeah, I was sick.
Yes.
This is like I think the second press thing that I've done for the Desert
Yeah,
Island
you've
game.
been very sick. Yeah. Yeah. So the book we're talking about today is the Desert Island game. There's a really good one of it. Yeah, so this came out January 15th. I'm gonna read the back really quick. The world has ended. Now what? That sounds exactly like a Kat Voleur book, doesn't it? The start of it. Now what? Oh, and I was going to ask you this too, because when it comes to pronunciations, everybody says things different. Do you say B or B?
Yes, it is B.
It is B. Okay, I thought so, but sometimes in my head I did not say B. I said Bay, but I think it's because my brain automatically relates. Anyway, sorry. All right, the world has ended. Now what? When B wakes to discover she and her lover Evian, right? Okay, are still alive after the apocalypse, things seem too good to be true. Soon she begins to suspect they are. The more concern she voices about their survival on an island paradise, the easier their lives become. Her attempts to ask questions are met by disinterest and anger from her partner. Why can she not remember key details about her life before coming to the island? Why is she seeing and hearing things that aren't there? How well does she really know Evian? As suspicion and distrust continue to mount, B realizes the apocalypse is the least of her worries. But is there a way off the island, and is paradise really hell? I love this cover so much.
I love the cover so much.
I'll try to stay on task. So I read some of this before it even I think got taken on to be published, right? It's been a while, but I feel like I read, was it maybe the first couple of chapters we talked about or something? So I was telling you before I hit record, it was hard for me to think about things to talk about because I feel like you and I specifically have talked about this one quite a bit, just even before it was published. But yeah, just kind of introduction things, talking about, the concept, inspiration for the concept, title, and the cover art, stuff like that. You want to walk us through
that? So the cover for this one, I talk about cover artists all the time.
You do.
But I love the cover for this so much.
Yes, me too.
It was, and now you know me, and the community knows me as someone that's kind of like a menace for collecting all the covers. But there was a point where that was not the case. That there was a point where I got like one cover at a time for things when I knew that they were mostly done. And I actually was working with Wayne. I picked up a cover for another project that I was working on at the time because he just this gorgeous, gorgeous cover. And I saw while we were talking that he had this up as a pre-made, and it was like, I want this so bad. It's like, I don't know what I would do with it. I don't have a story. It felt very like tropical and fun. The original title, the like placeholder title that was on there was actually a pun. It was called Welcome to Paradise. And I like the whole vibe was just so fun. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. That's not like and I went back and forth, and finally it was just like, I have to have this. Like, I can see my name on it. I need it. I don't know what I'll ever do with this, but it was like, it was working in the back of my head somewhere, because like when I had the idea finally, it was like, and it wasn't even that I had the idea. It was that I was doing a writing challenge on very,
Oh,
very
okay.
short notice. I
Yeah.
was like, "What do I wanna write today?" And it was like, "I've gotta do something with an island, like,
Yeah.
do this island thing." Um, so that was I started cover first, and I actually I
Okay.
talk about this a lot too. I pulled Wayne out of retirement to
Yeah.
do the rest of this cover because I was so obsessed. This was the story ended up not being like anything I had written. I didn't really want to like market it myself. I'm unshaky at self pub anyway, and
Sure.
I wasn't
Yeah.
sure what the demographic was here. So I did start
Okay.
querying it, and the reception was really good. It did get picked up, and that's why I'm here. But I wrote them and I was like, "Hey, can I pitch cover art?" And they're like, "Yeah, do you have cover art for this?" And
Mm,
I do. And, but Wayne at that point had left the pre-made field, so I was like,
sure.
"Please, please, please back for this," 'cause, Slashcore, they, care a lot about artist integrity, so they didn't wanna just have, like, someone finish it,
Yeah,
they can
yeah,
get the
no,
original person back.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
I like
I don't feel like that's something you would have done anyway. I feel like you probably would have figured
no.
something else out. Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, no, the details in this, I'll put it up again while I talk about this specifically because, when you first look at it, obviously you notice a skull in the water, but I think if you continue to look at it, you
Yeah.
realize that there's actually stuff in the water, which is
Yeah.
such a like I think it is so crazy because I know we talk about covers a lot specifically. And we talk a lot like covers, like a cover being like so perfect for a story, like it should be for this story, but like for real, like this really fits everything about this book. Like from the colors to like the almost like peaceful disruption in the water to like the stuff that's in the bottom of it. Like, I don't know, like I just when I saw pictures of it long before I had a physical one. This one's signed, be jealous. Like but holding it, man, like and you got obviously you experienced this as the person who wrote the book who wanted the cover. So like but like holding it and looking at it, I'm like, holy shit, this cover is so stunning and it just looks so perfect for the story that is in the pages behind the cover.
That's good to hear. Cause there was a time where I just was like, "I don't know if I can ever do any kind of justice to this cover that I've acquired."
Yeah.
Um,
Where when the desert island game, and I think the reference for that is probably pretty clear, but
yeah.
what made you kind of land on that title? How'd you end up picking that?
So it was the 3rd or 4th if you count Welcome to Paradise. Because I honestly thought about keeping it. It's like, how what are the chances I can keep that? Um, but it did not fit the strange direction that the story took. Um,
Yeah, sure.
but it did have 2 other it had, like, a working title. A
Mhm.
lot of my projects do have working titles. Usually, they're also song titles. Um
Oh, I can see. Yeah.
it wasn't the case with this one. I actually just, because when I started this, I didn't really know where it was going to end up. So I ended up I think the working title for this was Purgatorio, which
Okay.
is a nod to the Divine Comedy, which is
Mhm.
actually what I I was taking a class on the Divine Comedy while I was
Yeah.
working on this, and a lot of the, like, existential stuff got cut out of it. The
Mhm.
original draft was a lot longer, but I think there's enough
Oh,
of it
okay.
that kinda shows through, where if you're really familiar with Dante, you can
Yeah.
probably be like, "I
Yeah.
see it.
The nods. No, yeah,
I
yeah, I
get
agree
it."
with that. I think I don't know if I picked up on all of them, but I definitely picked up on some of those vibes when I was reading it. Yeah, no, I you took a class on it? What does that mean? Like
I
it
took,
was
like, there's, like, a series of there's a course you can take. That's something that I do sometimes. I take, like you can take online courses from Ivy League schools where you don't get,
okay.
like, the full curriculum, but you get, like, a topic of the curriculum, and there was one about the Divine Comedy, and I was like, "I need to know what's going on here." Um,
Huh.
And
Yeah.
usually they're like real things. They're like uh, economics or I've taken
Sure.
like a couple about like uh gender diversity and
Sure.
I took one on the Reconstruction era, but when I saw that there was like a whole one, it was like an 8-week course on the Divine Comedy, and I was like, I've got to know,
I'm not
like,
surprised that it's that lengthy though. I mean, I think that there's a lot to dissect. I know like I touched on it when I was in AP English, but it was like, I mean, bare minimals coverage of like just I don't know, like super basic stuff. Like
yeah.
definitely no deep dives. And I imagine to really break it all down, yeah, it would take like a long time. I can see that. Huh.
It did. And it
Yeah.
was very interesting. And it was weirdly, in a lot of ways, even though a lot of the references and like extended lore got taken out of the Desert Island game, I do think that it would not have happened had I not been taking a class on the Divine Comedy, which is
Hmm.
just it. I found it weirdly inspiring. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
because, like, on the one hand, it's like, this is one of the greatest pieces of literature ever written, and on
Yes.
the other hand, it's objectively very silly, and it,
Yes.
like, when you're
Yes.
studying it in that much detail and you're picking it apart and you're, like, looking at all of these things, there are things in the Divine Comedy that, like, fan fiction writers get made fun of today, and that's essentially what the Divine Comedy is. It's Bible fan fiction,
Fan fiction. Yeah.
like, but if a teenage girl wrote about her favorite book where she gets to like meet the characters
Mhm.
and the people that were mean to her are getting tortured for eternity and like
No,
there are
that's true. I
also
see
good
what you
gods
mean.
there, they'd get
Yeah.
bullied, but it was like, and picking this apart, it was so funny because it was like you just never know what's going to age well, and that made me weirdly comfortable doing something out of my comfort zone where it's just like I can write
Yeah.
anything I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I chose
And
this.
so when you started writing it, you said you did not know the direction it was gonna go in? You didn't know it was gonna go or end, I get or the last little bit going the way that it does, that was not planned?
That was not planned, no.
Hmm.
None of it was planned.
That makes it even more interesting though as a because I mean, I will say, like, it's fluid. Like, I don't think you would it's not like you're gonna read through this and go, well, clearly they didn't have this part figured out. Like, I don't think that that's something that a reader would pick up on. I think it flows really well. It connects very well. It and like it's just very as you're reading it, it's just you just go, yeah, that makes sense. Like it doesn't. There was never a moment where like I questioned a shift or a change or you know what I'm saying. So that's
I
why I think
appreciate
that's
that.
yeah, that's impressive that you went into and you're
Um,
like, we'll see what happens.
I did a lot of work on this one. The rough draft was a
Mhm.
lot more scattered, and very bloated. Like, it was about double the length of this, and
Oh,
it
okay.
didn't need to be, because I figured out I kind of at some point figured out where I wanted to go with it, but at that point,
Mhm.
I'd been writing it for kind of a long time, and
Yeah.
this was the 3rd draft, essentially, of the book. The first
Okay.
one was close to novel length, it was, like, just shy of 50,000 words,
Okay.
and then I kind of overcorrected. I had a version in the middle, which I think might have been the version that you read
Mhm.
that was,
Before.
like,
Mhm.
15,000 that I was
Yeah.
playing with, and I submitted it one place, and they shortlisted it, so I was like, "Aha, it's done." And then when I when it got rejected, I was, like, going back through to do one final round of edits, and I was like, "I'm not sure this makes any sense, like, I need to put some of that stuff back in here so that,
Yeah.
there's context."
Yeah, because this sits at just under 140 pages, so it's relatively
Yeah.
quick. And then, of course, there are some sections that are shorter than others as far as, like, like, I think the first chapter is what, like, a sentence? 2
Yeah.
sentences, something like that. So it's very, like, it's a very quick read, and that's saying something coming from me because God knows I'm not but I think some of what made it feel like a quick read is just because it was engaging and I wanted to keep reading it, whereas some stuff I have to take a break and come back because I'm like, I'm bored. And then I have to come back and um but yeah, so you didn't have this before the cover. So what was the process like? I mean, timing wise, how long did this concept or idea exist before it got picked up to be published?
I think this might oh, That's not entirely true. Revenge Arc was,
Mhm.
I think, maybe my fastest, even though it got rejected a lot more times. Um,
Crazy to me. Yeah.
this was like the second shortest of like having written it to it being picked up.
Yeah.
And I think that was about 6 months.
Dang. Oh,
It worked
okay.
that first month was really, really quick because it was normally there's a bit of a period where like I get something finished and I sit on it for a long time before I circle back around and edit it. But I had an idea that I
Mm.
really wanted to submit this somewhere,
Mhm.
and that gave me about a month deadline to fix the mess that was the first draft. Which I think is why I chopped too much out the first time around, but I got it in and, I didn't touch it for another couple months, and then I was getting it ready to send out again, um,
Mhm.
like, later that summer, and it actually got picked up. I this is kind of fun. I remember the day that it got picked up because I was celebrating. I had my belated Revenge Arc celebration. I
Uh-huh.
had to do like a launch party the day of. But I had wanted to celebrate with a tattoo. So it was like the 8th. I was getting my celebratory I'm a published author tattoo the day that I
Oh,
got to sign
cool.
the contract for Desert Island Game. So that
Oh,
was
that's
fun.
funny. Yeah,
But
that's funny.
but yeah, like in August. So it was pretty much like a summer whirlwind kind of it was done a little bit before that, but it
Mhm.
was an earlier draft and so yeah, about 6 months.
And I know, like, it's obvious that to get it to the point that it's at now, it was an expanded timeline of things because you changed it, you went back to it, you
Yeah.
shortened it, you added stuff back. Do you know, like, about how long it took you to write the first one? Like, as far as like the first version of it as it was, um, originally.
I do. It took 3 days.
Jesus.
I went into I
What?
so it
3
took
days?
3 days to write the novel-length mess that was the original version of so what happened was there's a challenge that I do, and this always annoys people because, the Revenge Arc, the rough draft of Revenge Arc was also about 50,000 words.
Mhm.
It was written in 24 hours, which I know because I wrote it for the 24-hour novel challenge, and,
Right.
this one, they do like an off-season challenge where it's just like 10,000 words in a day, any day that weekend,
Mhm.
which I didn't know about in advance. So Friday,
Mhm.
I found out that that was a thing that was going on, and I was like, I'm not doing anything today. I can write 10,000 words. And just like blindly went into this challenge. And at about the 10,000 word mark, I was like really feeling the dynamic between the characters. That was like
Mhm.
the one solid part of the book that I kept. That was like
Yeah.
the core of what was going on. And I was like,
It's
I'm really into
important,
this.
yeah.
I'm gonna keep going. And about the 20,000 word mark, I was like, I know what I want to do with it. Like, I know what the story is now. I have a plot. Like, I'm not gonna quit now. So I woke
Yeah.
up the next day and just like kept going, and it was kind of like a fugue state. Like, this is all I got done that week.
Yeah. That's crazy. I can't even imagine. Yeah, I mean, I think that I think the entire story depends on that connection between the 2 because and I like that, like, so I'm the anxious attachment style, as you know, and, the I feel like, I was like when I was reading through, probably maybe not the first time, but reading through it as its final version as it is now, um, B is somebody that like I'm like, I have got like trust issues. I'm like questioning things and I'm like, I like that would, so those kind of moments like gave me stress because that would be me in real life. I would be like, no, like, we do need to talk about it though, right? Because like, otherwise my head is gonna fucking explode, like, I can't deal and so, like, the whole time and at the same time, like, the way she feels about this opportunity to finally be with this other person and, like, her feelings about all of that and in general it just all made so much sense. And I was like, I get it. Like it was so easy to connect to her. I think even from the very, 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 very beginning. And then as, you know, as things kind of shift and the dynamic kind of goes in different directions a few times, it's like, it was just so easy to stay connected to her and to them and to what was happening. And that's not always like, that's always, I wouldn't say like a super easy thing to get people invested in, because characters sometimes, like, concepts can be super, super cool, but if they rely on character development and character arcs and character like engagement with the reader, and that's not there, then the rest of it falls apart. But it's so heavily, this story particularly relies so heavily on that connection to really help feel out like the world and the things that are happening and affect what you're thinking about and feeling while you're reading it as a reader.
I'm really glad to hear that. One of the biggest differences between the final draft and the
Mhm.
like rough draft was that it was dual POV in the original.
Yeah.
And like trimming it down, I went back and forth a little bit about what, because you know the different characters have different angles on this. They have different issues, and
Yeah.
uh
Right.
i- that was kind of the defining like what story do I want to tell here moment.
Yeah.
And ultimately I felt like B was a more relatable character for, you know, like wider
Yeah.
audiences, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Evian is the character we wish we could be. She's like, it's fine. Everything
Yeah.
is perfect. Let me show you the pantry. But no, like, but yeah, and then but the other side is like that. Yeah, I think she's the more realistic of the two, because I
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, I'm telling you, my head would explode. Like, there's just no way. And the amount of like, well, because and I know like we're keeping this super spoiler free because we want people to read the book, obviously. But you know, like even in the like very beginning, like the amount of trust that B has to give her, it is like I don't know. I think like I trusted her because B did, but on the inside, like if I was put in that situation, I'd be like, "We're going to the where? Why are we like?" I would be so on edge the whole time, and it was just so like what's the, I guess like endearing the way she, you know, she's got Evian on this very high pedestal of who this person is. She doesn't think that she deserves to be involved with her in a romantic way at all, in an intimate way, any type of way like that. And so there, that kind of stuff just made it like where I think it was it. I'm agree. My whole point in saying all of that is that I think B is the one to tell the story through, because I think you're just get all of those things. Like all of those
Yeah.
things are things that I think everybody goes through and has felt at some point in their life. And then the opportunity presents itself the way that it does. And you're always waiting on the other shoe to drop. You know, you're like,
Yeah.
I don't know. This isn't how things go. What's going on? You know, so I think it was a really good choice to tell it through her perspective instead of doing the dual POVs.
Yeah. I think it made the book a lot sharper and cleaner, and I think
Yeah.
it was a little bit sad because I do think we lose a little bit of that like well-roundedness that, you know,
Sure.
Evian had as like a villain. You know, I don't
Yeah.
want to call her a villain, but she's
I know what you
definitely
mean
like
though.
the counter, the foil, I guess, to be.
Yes.
Um, whereas like she was an equal character, you
Sure.
know, in the rough draft, and that was a little bit hard. But I think I think the same would have been true if I had swapped them, because it's just like a perspective shift, you know,
Mhm.
and
Sure.
obviously when two people are, you know, butting heads, you feel more for the person that you're following because you see it from their side. So
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
and that was another thing. I'm glad you brought up the trust that B has to have to like find
Yeah.
herself in this situation,
Mhm.
because I think we've all been, you know, we sit back at home and we watch horror movies and it's like this is just not a situation where I'd find myself in. But I think we all also have that one person that if they were like, "Hey, I want to do this thing," we would
Yep.
very quickly find ourselves in that
We would just
situation.
risk our lives or whatever. No, that's true. And I think that's exactly my, yeah, that's exactly where I was going with that, is it's just so relatable, even if it has been a while since you've been in that position, or even like, I just think that concept, that feeling about another human being is
Yeah.
just super, super relatable because we've all been there at some point. Some of us are there now. Some of us were there, 5 years ago. Like either way, like it's super relatable.
And
So yeah.
it was something that and I'm glad that it still comes across that way, because that was another big thing
Hmm.
um that changed, that I was worried about in shortening it,
Hmm.
because it like really, there was a lot more exposition. There were like flashbacks and stuff,
Oh,
where
okay.
you kind of see how B gets into a situation where she gets on an island with, with this
Yeah.
person that like for essentially what's like their first date. Like they're not
Yeah.
a couple previous to
No.
this. And there was a lot more build up about, cuz like it does start with the world having ended. There was a lot
Mm.
more build up about like how people prepare for that kind of,
Yeah.
whatever. And I do think that's kind of, because you fantasize about having like a big end of the world, what would you like to be doing? And you get to do it, but you get to live that life under the
Mhm.
assumption that you don't get to keep living it, you know?
Right. It's temporary. Yeah.
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 So,
Um, and while it's in my brain, I wanted to read the dedication. If I can make my pages look. So the dedication is to all the lovers, past and future, who I would not want to be stuck on an island with.
yeah. They're there.
I thought that was hilarious.
The craziest one is, I think out of like all of my exes that I could be stuck on an island with, the only one I've actually been to an island with is the one that would drive me the most crazy.
The most
I'm not gonna say
crazy.
that he inspired this, but I was thinking about it when I wrote the dedication, because it's like, oh
Yeah.
man.
Oh, I am
So
not, there are plenty of adults who end relationships amicably and they like don't, want to rip out their exes like throats. I don't have that luxury. I think I'd get zero. Like there's not a single, I couldn't do it. I would murder. Yeah, it would happen. Like there's no way. It's like as much as scared of sharks as I am, if they were still a thing, I'd be like, just do it. Just get it over with. I can't do this anymore. Like, yeah, that would be the one thing that could get Angel over her fear of sharks, being stuck somewhere with any of the exes that I have had. Um, yeah. So, were there any obstacles in the story itself that you had to overcome as you were writing, whether it be the first draft or when you were getting it revamping it to get it published?
So, we talked a little bit about like the rough draft. I didn't know where it was going, and then,
Sure.
kind of the overcorrecting and the fears that I had, like when I had the final draft, because at that point I'd been overthinking it quite a bit, where
Sure.
it's like I don't know if it works without the context of all of the things that I took out, and
Hmm.
so there was all that kind of stuff, but also it just, I, I felt strongly like this might not go over well. Like there was a lot of fear. It's kind of a hard story to describe. I tag the word surreal onto it, so
Yeah.
that people kind of know what to
Yeah.
expect when they go in. But I don't think anyone really gets it until they're reading it. And
Yeah.
so like marketing was a hurdle, and editing was kind of a hurdle. David, Jack, and we get along pretty well.
Hmm.
We're friends outside of this, and he's a great editor to work with. But it was hard for me to communicate like why I made some of the very specific choices that I made in this,
Yeah.
because they go against kind of how I write naturally sometimes, and I'm a
Oh,
very
okay.
descriptive person
Hmm.
usually. and it was really hard to like not describe things until they were being brought up naturally, because I
Mhm.
wanted it to have that kind of dreamy atmosphere,
Yeah,
but that
yeah.
meant that I couldn't like, and I remember the one kind of like, it wasn't a fight, but like the one back and forth we really had, everything else had been edited. We'd gotten rid of my adverbs and the typos and, like everything was ready to go except for there was like one section that he had highlighted where B is coming from the bedroom to the kitchen, and he was like, I need you to explain to me like what the layout of this house is. And I was like, I need you to trust me that I know what the layout is, but I can't tell you what it is. Like, we kind of went back and forth, and he's like, I'm not picturing the architecture in a way where it makes sense. Like so finally I drew him like a little map, and I was like, it looks like this, but we can't show this. Like I can't, because
Yeah.
I can only, I went so far out of my way to only describe what she's seeing at the time,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it's like putting things in relation to one another. And like once I had shown him like what it was I was talking about, he was able to visualize it and we could kind of move past it. But he was
Mhm.
like, we had like a lot of little hangups like that where it was just
Mhm.
like it was really hard to describe what was in my head to
Yeah.
my editor in a way that it made sense.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about that as far as the descriptions, but that's true because, like, when you're reading through it, you are really only thinking about whatever she's talking about in the moment.
Yeah.
I wasn't really there, and I didn't realize that that wasn't something I really thought about until you said that, though. Like, I
Yeah.
just I just went with it, but you're right. Normally it's like you walk into a room and you describe what's in it, what the floor looks like, how it smells, whatever. But it's not. This is not written that way, and it's not something
No.
I'd really even like. It just, and I think it's probably a testament to, again, how fluid it is when you're reading and just how it kind of flows. But it also, I think, pulls you into that perspective even further, because then you're only being given what is in, like, right here in the moment. And I think that has to add to the, I would imagine, even if just subconsciously, that adds to that whole surreal dream-like feeling, because in your dreams, when you're dreaming, you
Yeah.
typically only see things that are up close and specific to what you're experiencing in the moment. You're not expanding that out into everything else around you. So that's really interesting. I realized that now that we're talking about it, but it wasn't something I had even really thought about in the while I was reading it. That's neat.
It was something my editor hadn't realized on that level either until we were like fighting about the floor plan of this house. I was like, and it was also hard. That was, I think, one of the big challenges for me, like as I was preparing to send it to him,
Mhm.
because it was because Evian noticed different things. Um so the world felt a lot more like flushed out in the rough draft, but then like
Sure.
following one character, and the way that I kind of treated it was like first person perspective
Mhm.
description in a third person style.
Yeah.
Because like in
Yeah.
first person it's really easy to get away with that style because it's,
Yeah.
you're doing stream of consciousness and
It's
you're
normal. Yeah.
describing what the
Yeah.
narrator is thinking and stuff, but it was like, it
Sure.
was very hard to stick to that as a rule in the third
Mm.
person where it's just like we can only talk about what's going on in B's head all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's neat. I really hadn't even realized it like that, but that's a good point. Yeah. I don't even know if I could. That seems like the perspectives in general for me can, like, it can be difficult to like, some stories just feel better in specific perspectives versus like others. Like, we've talked about this as far as like start writing something and it's like it just naturally is this perspective, or it is naturally, third person, or it's naturally whatever. And then it's another thing to go in and be like, okay, it's going to be this perspective, but
Yeah.
yeah. No, that's cool. Um we talked a little bit about the process to get it published. With you doing it this way of having the cover first,
Yeah.
I know this already, I think, just because we talk about writing in books and stuff so much, but your writing process is it's varied, right? Like, it's not
Yeah.
it's not the same. So maybe instead of saying what is your writing process, maybe a better way to say it is, what are some of the ways you choose to write books and things that work for you? Like, because I know personally, it's like it's a bunch of different stuff, but just what that looks like for you.
This is and I feel this way whenever I have to give writing advice because
Yeah,
I am someone that doesn't always like to receive writing advice. Um,
that's a
but
mood. Get that?
like it feels obnoxious to say, and it's the same way with like health stuff where people are like, "How do you stay so healthy?" And it's like, "I drink 64 ounces of water a day," and you're like, "I don't want to hear that." like, um, but it's very much the same thing. Like, you have to write all the time. It's a discipline. You have to do it when you don't feel like doing it, and, I don't think that you have to do it every day,
Hmm.
which is what most people say, but I think you have to be in the habit of doing it more days than you don't, you know?
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
it's just making time for it and treating it
yeah.
like a job and getting it done, and that's the thing it makes it really special because I used to be when I was a hobbyist writer, I would
Hmm.
not write for, like, long, long stretches of time, and then I would sit down and I would do a novel, and I'd be like, "Good to go," and then I never had to worry about editing it or, like, any of the hard stuff because it was
Yeah.
just for me and who cared? But,
Y-
like,
Sure. Fair
that
enough.
doesn't
Yeah.
fly anymore, that doesn't fly in publishing. I can't just, like, mail off that draft to somebody and be done. Um, so having, like, that, routine and coming back to it and stuff, but it does make projects like this, like the desert island game where I just hopped in randomly and was like, "I feel like doing this today." And then I felt like doing it so much that I kept doing it, like, the whole day, the next 2 days. Like, it makes those moments really special because very often I don't get to have those anymore.
Yeah.
Um and I'm not gonna say that, like, it made this project better or that I am, like, more proud of this and Revenge Arc, which was the same way, where it was just
Yeah.
kind of like, feverish writing session, and I got through it,
Yeah.
and, those are really special moments, but I think something that I've learned is that, like, very often the projects that come the easiest, like,
Mhm.
through other stages, are the ones where it's like, I just get up and write for like an hour a day whether or not I want to, because I
Oh,
have to put thought into those and plan them and,
sure.
there's structure and yeah, that's kind of the thought process is just like the more I do it, the better I'm going to be at it.
Yeah. Yeah. So on the days and you don't feel like doing it, you just what do you mean make yourself? That's not a thing. Is that a thing?
It's a thing. Um,
And so like how do you make cuz like well first of all I'm very new to the writing
Sorry.
like in this style anyway because I've done online group stuff which you know this already but for years since 2003. But as far as like trying to genuinely write something to put out into the world, that's all very new to me still. And there, I mean, I definitely go chunks of time where I just can't do like I just sit there and I'm like, I got nothing in me today. And I cannot get anything. And if I do, nine times out of 10, I'm going to erase it all the next time I try. Like I don't, so I'm baffled by the fact that you're like, yeah, no, you just make yourself. I'm like, oh, you are the key word you said, discipline, right?
Yeah, and actually this was an idea that I got from I think from On Writing was
Mhm.
where I picked this up for the first
Okay.
time. It
Yeah.
kind of evolved from there, how because, you pick up writing advice and then you adapt it to work for you.
Hmm.
The making myself write thing was a thing that I learned from Stephen King. Whether or not it was on writing, it was in an interview, if not there, but because
Yeah.
he talks about craft a lot. It could have been anywhere, honestly. It was a long
Sure.
time ago. I was,
Yeah.
like, 15 when I picked up this advice. Um, and it was just that, like, he makes the time to write, and he sticks to that writing time, and it's okay not to get anything done. And I found that once I was in the habit of just like, I'm going to sit in this room for an hour, whether or not I write a single word. This is my writing time. I'm going to do that. Like, that didn't work real great for me because my mind would wander and,
Ugh.
I'd play games in my head or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm over here like singing Hamilton in my office for an hour every day, and people are like, "What's going on with her?" Like
I'm writing.
it's my writing time. But like carving out the time is the hardest part. And from that, I was able to like pick up writing exercises and like tips and tricks to kind of like actually get writing done in that hour,
Mhm.
even on days that I didn't want to.
Yeah.
You actually just had Radar on here
Yeah.
talking about like his daily Twitter prompt.
Yeah, the word
And
prompts. Yeah. Yeah.
I actually had, and when he came to me about formatting, that was something that I kind of had an idea how to format it because I had done my upcoming collection that way, where I had like the prompt first, and because for a long time I did daily like flash fiction prompts, which I maintain to this day that flash fiction is easier than microfiction. Microfiction is the hardest thing a person can,
I don't
except for Drabbles.
I
I think it's
said
like
that,
Drabbles
man.
and then
I was like,
microfiction. And
I was like, first of all, so like when Lauren asked about the 2 sentence thing, I was like, yeah, cool. And then I was like, I can't fucking do that. Tell a story in 2 sentences. Why did I say yes to this? And he's just like, and some of his are longer than 2 sentences, but like
Twitter
the
length, though.
the ability to come up with a full-fledged story. I mean, obviously there's a limited amount of world building, right? Which is definitely an Angel issue. But it's one of those things where it's like I I don't know. Like I wrote it's not out yet, but it'll be out, I don't know, whenever Tasha posts it. But I sent her my review today for it for a year spent in horror. And I
Yeah.
was like, how do I not write 6 paragraphs about what a genius he is for being able to do so damn many of these? Like I don't that was like I got so hung up on that because I'm like, how? Like I don't understand because
You do.
flash fiction is usually within what word range?
It's 500 to 1,000 or
Yeah.
1,500. Some
Okay.
people
Okay.
round up,
Yeah. So super short. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
but it's short,
Yeah.
yeah.
Microfiction. I didn't even know what that term was. I just considered it a headache. It was hard. That's what I called it. Hard. And so I'm like 360. Jesus. Yeah.
And that was, so, like, I did a similar thing, and it was
Mhm.
easier because it was longer.
Sure.
Microfiction is insane to me, but it got me in the
Yeah.
practice of doing it every day, and I was actually telling Tasha because 'cause we've been talking about my, our contributor. Our formatting and editing copies respectively of that collection just came in yesterday. So we were talking about like how hard
Oh,
microfiction
yes.
is and like
Yes.
flash fiction and stuff. And I was thinking back to like my collection and how I wrote it. And it's like I for a full year of my life, the first thing I did every day was write. I was like in a contest group that did like a daily flash fiction. And the first
Yeah.
thing I would do like every day during that like writing hour that I set aside for myself was I would write a flash fiction based off of a prompt. And it took me like a year to have enough entries that were good enough to consider polishing up into a collection. And the fact that Radar is just like I know that it was like a few years that he pulled like the best from, but still I was in
Still.
awe because and that was like so my collection it's like I think it's 20 some stories and it's like from a full year I got 20 out of those that were usable like I
Yeah.
I'd have to go for like a full decade before I had one for every single day of the year. That's insane.
And he's so humble, you
I
know?
know.
He's just sitting here like, "No." He's like and it was so funny because like, we were talking about something similar in our I don't know if it made it in the interview. I can't remember if it was we talked for a long time after I ended the recording. But, like, we were talking about it, and he's talking about how he had, like, beta readers. Oh, this is in the interview. He's talking about beta readers. And he's like, yeah, and he's like, and I'm assuming they're all going to say the same one sucked, but then they like responded and they all had different opinions on different stories. And I was like, you do realize that's a good thing, right? Like that means like that's a good problem to
He's
have, not
reaching, like,
knowing what
different
stories to cut because nobody can agree which ones need to be cut.
yeah.
But he's so like just you know what I mean? Like he's not sitting up here like, well, he's just like, yeah, like it was so hard because I had to cut some and I didn't know which ones to cut. And I'm like, life is so hard for you.
He has too many good stories.
it took me how long to even get a couple of things together for that 2-sentence thing. God knows I had to message you about it 100 times. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. 2 sentences. What?
Insane.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I think I'm saying this with no kind of basis if it's true. I imagine if it worked anything for him like it did for me, that like a lot of the ones he kept were the ones later on, because it's like once you do that every day, even if and his were fantastic, like he couldn't narrow them down to 356, but like when I was trying to narrow mine down, I noticed that like a lot of my later entries were stronger because it was just like the practice
Yeah,
helped.
that makes sense.
Even though most of it was unusable and it got
Mhm.
really repetitive, and you could see me using the same tropes over and over and over again during like certain stretches because it was just on my mind or whatever. Or because I couldn't come up with anything original some days. It was like the more I just like got up and was like, I'm going to make myself do this, the easier it got to do that. And like even moving into longer fiction, because I haven't done a short story in a while. I think the last short story I did was for her zombie anthology.
Mhm.
Um, I've not had time to do like submissions and stuff this year, but like
Yeah,
it's
you're
the same kind
busy.
of principle for longer fiction, except for it's like a chapter you do. You get up and make yourself do a chapter of something, and I and some days there are like this weekend I didn't get anything done, and even when I do, some days it's like 500 words as opposed to like
Yeah,
5,000 words. And
sure.
but
Yeah.
doing it all the time, just it helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, what's your favorite part about writing this story? Or yeah,
uh
favorite part about writing the story?
the story,
Mhm.
I really liked writing the dialogue for this.
Mhm. Yeah.
um I like writing dialogue anyway. I feel like that's my favorite part of most stories, but I really liked it for Desert Island game.
Mhm.
Um, because I did at this point, like, especially by the time I was editing dialogue, I
Mhm.
felt so in both of those characters' heads,
Yeah.
um, you know, that it was very
Yeah.
natural. And a lot of the
Yeah.
parts of the story were not.
No, yeah, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with their connection. I think the dialogue is really the stitch work that keeps everything together and makes things that regularly wouldn't seem very cohesive, but with that specific thing in place, it's very cohesive. Like it just like I said, it was like when things would come up or things would happen as things start to become different from the beginning starts one way, it gets to be a different way. And I think like as that is starting to happen, as I was reading, there was never a time where I was literally just like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Like it just works. And I think it's a testament to that because obviously the thoughts that we get from B help, but the dialogue too just really shows all of those things that like I think pull everything together. So that makes sense to me. Yeah.
And this is like such a small detail. Um, I really I really like looking back, I really like that I got to make eggs ominous. That's like such
Oh,
I felt I felt very much like it reminded me of Funny Games. I don't know if you've seen it, but it just like uh is good. I posted it was like forever ago, but there was like one of those post the
oh.
thing, like post a picture of your work in progress with
Yeah,
like out of context
with no
spoilers or
context.
whatever. And I got to
Yeah.
just have like the carton of eggs, and I was like, I've peaked as a writer. This random carton of
Oh
eggs.
my god. Oh, that's funny. We talked a little bit about this already, but kind of circling back to writing advice. So, was there any writing advice that you took
I
in
did.
regards to the project? Yeah.
I had to take I will
I
say,
had
because
to.
I had to. I
I had
don't
to take.
I don't like taking writing advice all the time. It
Yeah.
varies. I feel I try to get along with my editors because I know that they're helping me.
Sure.
But I have a tough time with it on certain projects. I don't think I've ever gotten so much advice specifically for a project as I did with Desert Island Game.
Huh.
Um, and and one of the I actually, while I was drafting this, while I was in between the short and medium drafts of this, my
Yeah.
Goldilocks book over here, while I was like while I was in between those stages, I read some of the worst advice. I read some of the worst writing advice that I'd ever read. And the thing about writing advice, and this is why I have trouble taking it, because like I'm
Mhm.
in a routine that works for me and
Sure.
it's such a delicate ecosystem. So
Yeah.
sometimes it does feel like taking new writing advice can end everything, and that freaks
Sure.
me out, and it
Yeah.
has happened. I read this article, and at the time, like, because you just don't know what is and like good or bad advice for you. It all looks the same until you try
Sure.
it, and
Until you
then,
try it. Yeah.
you
Makes sense.
spiral, and, um, I
Everything ends up on fire.
I read this article that just like it made me stop writing because I just like I got so overwhelmed trying to like enact this advice that it brought
Mhm.
me to like a complete halt. I was like
Dang.
I was so freaked out about it, and it was like it was kind of an innocuous article. It was like, here are 5 things that you should do your debut year or whatever. And I read it like right
Oh,
before
yeah.
Revenge Art
Yeah.
came out, and it just like it sent me off. I was like, "I'm not prepared. I don't
Yeah.
wanna have a debut anymore, like, I don't have anything lined up for
Aw.
after. I don't know what I'm doing," and it was like and it
Yeah.
had all these targets with, like, example authors and stuff of, like, how many anthologies they were in following and,
Yeah.
like, how much PR they did
Right.
and, like, the timeline for their next release and stuff, and I just, like I was so stressed about this. I ended up getting a writing coach for a little while, and JC Morris, fantastic writing coach, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Um, but he like we worked together. We had a couple sessions
Yeah.
of I was like his first freelance writing client, and he uh helped sort me out, but, like, at the time, because I was, like, in the middle of an existential crisis when I signed up for coaching,
Mhm.
and he was like and I think he was surprised that I had, like that I could write because I had such a tough time, like, describing where I was at in my career and like what was going on with my projects, and I just came in so disorganized. And and one of the first things he did was he was like, I want you to just track how much you're writing like in between this session and our next session, just so you
Okay.
have a log of things you've done, like that we can talk about. And that helped, I think, more than most things that we did, because it was like I am getting stuff done and I have a list
It
of things I've
you had, like, the
accomplished.
actual proof of
Like,
it in front of you. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
I can see
but
that.
like one of the things that he did, in addition to the list, was he had me send him like my work in progress, which at the time was the Desert Island game.
Oh, okay.
And after like I think we had 3 sessions and then like a closeout session. But like at the very end, he was like, I'm not sure why you're getting coached. Like, this is all you have an addiction to filler words. There are way too many adverbs. This is all stuff that can be cleaned up like in an edit. Like I don't
Yeah.
need to be here. Like you can do this. Uh Especially cuz like the contrast between like the first 2 chapters and the next 2 chapters,
Yeah.
which were more poorly edited. I hadn't been over as many times, and he was like,
Sure.
"I know you know how to do this. Like, what are you doing?"
Dang.
I was like, "I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know what I'm doing with my life." And he was like, "Okay, make goals and like submit it. Like get your shit
Yeah.
done." And I was like, "Okay." But
Yeah.
like keeping track of what you're accomplishing helped me so much. And
Yeah.
then like it sounds so basic. And if anyone's watching this and thinking about writing coaching, JC put this a lot nicer than I'm going to paraphrase him here, but like the getting your shit done and getting it out was like
Yeah.
it helped me a lot.
Yeah.
because my
Yeah.
turnaround time for this was great, but, like, I was sitting on it. It took me, like, 2 weeks to decide what project I wanted to get done, and
Yeah. Well, because I mean, obviously, like we're in a new year. So the stuff that came out last year doesn't technically count as this year, right? Because it's 2023. But you've
yeah.
put out a lot in a very what I feel personally is a short time frame. And that's not including, and that's just stuff you've done by yourself. I'm not even talking about like the bathroom anthology. I'm not talking about other stuff that you've done. I'm talking about just the stuff you've put out with just your name on it.
Yeah.
It's up to 4 or 5. Let's see. This one, Revenge Arc, Puppet Shark, Kill My Darlings.
Mhm.
Am I missing one?
Monomore.
Monomore, thank you. And it's been 6 months
Yeah.
or like something crazy like that. And I'm like middle of March and I haven't even gotten through any of the like in no progress on projects I wanted to get out this year. So that's insane to me that, and I know some of those fit different because, this was something you worked through multiple times before it got published. I know Kill My Darlings is shorts that some of them are most of them, all of them had already existed. But still you have accomplished a lot like in a very short time frame as far as getting stuff out there. And I love one of my favorite things is like I make sure to tell people this because I feel like sometimes we talk about our friendship and I think people think that's the only reason I read your stuff. But I was a fan of your writing before we ever became friends because you submitted to Livestock and your story was one of my favorites. And at that point I knew who you were, but we weren't doing content. We hadn't talked a lot. Like that was at like the very beginning of when we sort of met,
Yeah.
and I always say that because I don't want people to think that the only reason I read your stuff is because we're friends. And that's not true because when I talk about things that I think highly of, it's not like same thing with Radar. Like I'm not sitting here
Yeah.
talking about how cool he is or great he is because he's my friend. It's because I genuinely feel that way. I became friends with Radar after I read one of his first like sci-fi action-y books. And so I say all that to say like I say it all the time. I'm like, everyone needs to be reading Cat Voleur. And it's so funny because you say this every time. You're always like, it's unlike anything I normally write, or it's not like anything I normally write. And I'm like, dude, that's everything you write. You say that. You're like, it's not. And I'm like, that's because you are capable of writing so many different things that you can't put Cat in a box. Like, and so when I got, because again, I had read some of this before it was published. But reading through the final one as is, obviously got the e-arc and then I got a physical, but it's crazy because I always feel like you're one of those people where like I don't think you're ever going to be predictable. I don't think people are ever going to be able to pick up a book and be like, well, I know what this is going to be about. And it's not that that's a bad thing to be predictable. I think there are plenty of authors where where they're going to go and that they're still super talented. You still super enjoy their work. I don't mean it in that way. I just think that it's very difficult to take something and do as many projects as you've done and they all be absolutely nothing alike. Like from Puppet Shark to Revenge Arc to like nothing that you've done, is anything like anything else. And it cracks me up because you say that and I'm like, yeah, that's literally everything that you do is different than anything you've done. And I love that. I think it's incredibly impressive because I did not read. I don't think the pieces I got of this beforehand were the whole thing. I think you just sent me some pieces of it, right? It was just like the first couple. You said it was like
I think
a
I
word
sent like the
something.
first part.
The first little bit. So I didn't know going into it as this is the story. This is the finish.
Yeah.
I didn't know where this was going to go, but I felt the same way when I read, Monomore. I felt the same way when I read Revenge Arc. And even in the shorts that I've read through in your collection, it's crazy to me. And so I think like, I think if you're watching still at this point, and you haven't jumped off my Cat Voleur train, yeah, people should be reading this. I think this is such a great story, and I loved. It's weird. It's a weird story, but I think it's oddly human, and I liked that about it too. And I think that when we talked about having you on to interview, like I'd be excited to talk about any project, but I do think it's cool that this got to be the first one where we sat down and talked about, your writing, as you know, because your writing comes up in general conversation. We're talking about other things, but to be able to really talk about and hear you talk about your writing has been really cool. So
I really appreciate you saying that like all of my stories are different than all my other stories. I feel
yeah,
like I say that a lot to the point where I feel like it's kind of a gimmick, but I and I don't mean it to be that way. The thing is that like my first couple of projects were never published
right.
or have not been published yet. Like the first book I've talked about this before that like I ever actively started querying was a pandemic book
Yeah.
that came out that was going to be published before the pandemic, and then like suddenly interests like tanked. But like with the exception of that, like the first two books that I ever like queried actively are coming out later this year. They did not get picked up first. They took like years of querying to find a home for. um
Yeah.
but I do have, like, in my earlier work, like, in my first few things, there are a lot of common themes. I feel like the style is very consistent. I feel like there was a voice that was my voice when I started writing professionally that
Mhm.
I've, sort of moved past, but I didn't know, like, because the first thing that I ever got published was Revenge Arc, which at that point, it was like I had all of these similar I have, like, these really tightly focused, like,
Mhm.
dystopian,
Okay.
kinda like
Yeah. I
first
gotcha.
person sad stories, and then I had one that was, like, different, and
Yeah.
that being published first, it was like I kind of came into the writing space like, "This is nothing I've ever done before,"
Right.
and
Yeah.
then there was a time where I thought, like, the Desert Island Game was going to be my, like, second ever published book, and I was so scared because it's like, even though I feel like this is a lot more like what I had been doing, it
Mhm.
was so different than the thing. Because like, I came on to the scene with people knowing me for, like, weird ass epistolary horror, and it's like, that's not what I do
Sure.
usually. Um,
Yeah.
but I do feel and actually, what all of these people are going to die, like, where we each did the one installation
Yep.
of we each killed one person. I
Mhm.
actually feel like my 2 most similar published books are my entry of that and Desert Island Game, because they're
Yeah.
both just, like, very tightly focused, like, 2 character
Yeah.
hellscapes that you're kind of stuck in. And this feels a lot more like this feels so much more like what I do and what I'm known for and like where my basis was in fiction, that it was really weird to come out and be like, this isn't like the other stuff that I've done. Because the things
Yeah.
that people had seen, at
Sure.
that point were very different than this. But I'm kind of excited with my upcoming I have another title. I actually just finished edits on it today.
Oh,
Um I have another slashic horror title called My Apologies to Tanya Grace. It is coming out this August, and I think
cool.
that it's kind of a return to form. It was one of the ones that I had written before Revenge Arc that I was trying to
Okay.
find a home for. The Lore
Yeah.
Keeper is coming out through D&T. It's kind of the same way.
Okay.
So there's going to be this year is kind of like a lull year where it's like these are the things I was doing before. And then it's going to be back to the crazy shit, I think, because that's just where I'm at now.
Sounds good. Yeah. That sounds good.
But
Yeah. Yeah, I really had fun with this one. This was really good. It was very engaging. It went some directions I wasn't expecting. I believed what was happening as it was being told to me. And yeah, like I said before, B is a super, super relatable character, and her feelings and the way her thought processes work towards Evian are I mean, so relatable. So yeah. I'll put a link in the description for where you can get a copy of the Desert Island Game by Cat Voleur if you don't already have it. Yeah, well, this is on you can get this on, is it just on Amazon? Not just,
it's
but you know what I mean.
it's on
Does it have it
Amazon. You can actually buy directly through
slash
Slashic Horror's website
okay.
now. So,
I'll post that too. I'll post that instead and then try to get it to go there instead of Amazon. But
um,
yeah, I'll put the link.
I don't know. I don't know where this is on the schedule of things to come out. Um, on your channel,
Mhm.
but I, depending on when it does, I will be selling either at AuthorCon or on the internet. We have misprints. We have so many misprints galore of the Desert Island game. We
Okay.
got fucked over by KDP and then by
Yeah.
Ingram and then by KDP again. So I'm going to be running a like $10 signed misprint sale. All the interior text is fine, but the covers are like not scaled correctly.
Okay. Yeah.
And those will be coming out with extras. So you can find me on Twitter and get in
Yeah.
touch with me if you would like a cheaper, slightly off-center copy.
What's the dates for AuthorCon again?
The 12th through the 14th, I believe.
Yeah, this will be out
is
before then.
AuthorCon. Okay.
This
So
will be
yeah,
out.
come find me at AuthorCon. I'll have discount copies there with me. I'll have normal copies there also.
Mhm.
They like just came in,
Yeah.
but
Okay. Cool.
definitely
All right. Yeah.
was so mad. I have so many misprinted copies of this.
I remember getting some of those messages. It's so infuriating. It's so frustrating. I really wonder sometimes if it's like a personal vendetta against you, like some of the things.
Gotta
Now, I
be.
mean, not so much with Ingram, I guess, but specifically with anything Amazon related. Yeah.
Yeah, I have copies my name's not on. Like, I have copies where the blurb has been cut off. I love the cover so much, but getting
Yeah.
it through Ingram for whatever reason
Crazy.
was just hell.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, Kat's information will be in the description for this episode, as well as the link on where you can get a copy of a perfect one. I guess I don't know what you call it. The
Yeah.
normal, what should be the standard.
The standard one are
The
the ones
standard
that are
one.
now being
Yeah.
sold by Slashic Horror Press. But if you want like a weird, kind of janky copy, you can get in contact with me directly and
We'll call them limited editions.
the limited edition. See, that's what we called the ones without my name on it. We were like, because at that point we were still laughing it off. We thought the trouble was done, and we're like, oh, these are fun, like limited edition.
Yeah,
Like Lauren has one that just does not have my name on it.
that's crazy.
It's like, oh no.
Oh man. I'm glad it worked out in the end and it was able to get resolved. Jesus.
We did, and it was worth it. I have no
Oh,
regrets.
yeah, it's stunning. It's so pretty.
It's beautiful.
Totally agree. All right, cool. Well, I think that's gonna wrap up this episode. Once again, I'll put links and socials and stuff in the description so you can get access to Kat and your own copy of the Desert Island game. Thanks for coming on and talking about it. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks for
we
having
talk a
me.
lot about writing, but there was a lot of stuff that you talked about that was cool to hear that we hadn't come up before. So I'm glad that we did this.
Me too.
All right, cool. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We hope you have a good rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend coming up, and we will see you in the next one.